Well, hello folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, folks, the Michigan connection. Are we going to find out if there was a connection between South Carolina and Michigan and this whole sign stealing thing? There are reasons to believe why this could be possible. And again, these are allegations and rumors. I cannot prove them. However, with everything that's going on with Michigan right now, we might at some point find out. It's not guaranteed because, as many of you know, Connor Stalions has refused to cooperate with the NCAA on anything whatsoever. They wanted to get a hold of his phone. That would have been huge. He also refused to interview with the NCAA. I mean, zero cooperation whatsoever after he resigned or quit or got fired or whatever it was when it all blew up that he'd been stealing signs for over 2.5 years. Now, as many of you that watch my show know, I have felt there's been a connection between South Carolina and Michigan on this for quite a while. It kind of became fairly obvious when you saw how South Carolina played after those two magical wins, when they beat two top 10 playoff-bound teams, and South Carolina had been pitiful. Prior to that, they had scored 16 points against Missouri and Florida total. The weeks prior, that was against teams that, have decent defenses, kind of similar to Tennessee and Clemson. And then suddenly they scored almost 100 points against Tennessee and Clemson, including 9 straight touchdowns. I've never even heard of that. And it seemed like South Carolina was always in the perfect play, and they always called the right play on offense. And it was really kind of odd. It was strange that that offense just started clicking like crazy when it had been so awful all year. And then we found out a lot of things after that. But one of the things that started to make me think along these lines was the fact of how poor they played after that. The next 9 games, they went 2-7. Now think about that. Same quarterback, same coach. 9 games, they go 2-7 after beating 2 top 10 teams. And they finally broke that horrible streak by beating Jacksonville State, who they were losing to in the fourth quarter until Jacksonville State fumbled. So none of that made sense. And then we found out there was an article in footballscoop.com that somebody with direct knowledge said that Connor Stalions may very well have reached out to a team that was going to play 2 playoff-bound teams that would have gotten in Michigan's way. Well, what were the 2 teams? Tennessee and Clemson. What was the one team that was going to play both of them at the end of the season? South Carolina. Yeah. And that really started getting the bells ringing, all of that. And then everybody started looking at it, and it was like, this just doesn't make any sense. Now, I put together a mountain of evidence. Obviously, the direct knowledge issue that somebody had said that he may have reached out. There's also the Beamer $25,000 fine where he was an assistant coach on another team. He took in information on an opponent that he should not have taken to the point the NCAA fined him $25,000, which is not a small fine for an assistant coach, especially back then. Now, I'm not saying he would have been the one that would have gotten the information. It could have very easily been an assistant because, as you know, Central Michigan had to fire their quarterback coach because he's the one that apparently let Connor Stalions onto their sideline. Now, think about that. He's working with other teams in order to help them and help himself. Exactly what people think he might have done with South Carolina. Granted, he wasn't on the sidelines, but if he's going to go to that length, you don't think he'd go to the length of trying to help a team that could knock out a couple opponents for him, especially had they lost to Ohio State? Absolutely. This guy would have done anything. He had dozens of people working for him, breaking the rules, going out there with smartphones and recording. He would buy their tickets, and they would record the plays and the signal so he could match them together, so he'd know what was coming. But the rest of the evidence, also there were those wristbands. If you'll remember, against Tennessee, at home, they used special wristbands, something they had not done all year. And suddenly you could just see the players, they'd look at the wristband, they were just suddenly in the right play. It was so odd. Then the following year, they come to Neyland, the loudest place in the world, probably one of the loudest stadiums in the country, easily. We're absolutely looking for revenge. We can't wait.
And I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
And what do? No wristband. No wristband. Are you kidding me? It's crazy. As an athlete myself who played Division I golf at UT, if I was doing something that was working, I would not change. The last thing you do is change it. That's crazy to do that, especially in a much louder environment where you're not going to be able to hear. You would love to have that wristband. Didn't have it. They just weren't the same team. They weren't the same team before those two games. They weren't the same team after. Very odd. Now, this got picked up by a lot of different journalists, a lot of YouTubers. This has been covered a bunch in the past. And actually, they talked to Hendon Hooker, and I'll show you his response about the questions about possibly having the signs. And, of course, he didn't know for sure. How would he know? But he was in the game. Anyway, this is how he responded, very professionally, by the way, because that's who Hendon Hooker is. He was a fantastic quarterback for us, and Detroit's lucky to have him.
There's reports that, and we know that Michigan and Connor Stallions bought tickets to Tennessee games to scout you guys as a possible college football playoff opponent or someone ahead of Michigan in those standings. There's also some insinuation that something may have been given to South Carolina based on their performance against you guys and Clemson in back-to-back weeks, two teams that Michigan scouted. Was anything off in that game? I know it was the first time they ever wore armbands on defense. Did you sense anything different that night as you guys were playing South Carolina?
I mean, they came to play that day. We just, could keep up with them in the scoreboard, factor. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe that they might have had it or they didn't. We still got to come out there and compete at a high level. And we didn't get the job done. So, it still falls on us whether they had them or not. But it was still great to be able to go out there and compete at a high level. I had fun that game, leading up to the injury. But it was, he say, she say. Not really worried, if they did or if they didn't, we didn't finish the job. So,
but it wasn't anything you guys talked about post game?
No, it was more of just, man, I'm hurt. So.
And so obviously he didn't know. The guy had torn his ACL. So the only thing he was thinking about after the game, I'm sure, was, oh my God, I've got to have surgery. I got to have, a long 1-year rehab. But anyway, he certainly didn't shoot down the rumors. He just doesn't know. But it had gotten to that point to where it was like, we need to start asking people what the heck's going on. Well, there was another YouTuber that I watch, and of course that was Outkick. This is actually Off the Hook with Dave Hooker and Caleb Calhoun. They discussed it the other day. And look, it doesn't take a whole lot to figure out that there's a lot of smoke. And usually where there's a lot of smoke, there's some fire. Well, anyway, let's see what they had to say. And this is a show I enjoy. I believe they are on at 10 a.m. They do a show Monday through Friday, and they cover Tennessee.
Here's why it affects Tennessee. According to the report that came last year, guys, in October of 2022, Connor Stallions bought tickets to a Clemson home game and a Tennessee home game. The Tennessee home game we found out was Kentucky, which was October the 25th. Tennessee went to play South Carolina, would have been, I guess, 3 weeks later. And in the most baffling loss I think I've ever witnessed from Tennessee, they just got blown out. Now, yes, there was a Hendon Hooker injury. Now, crazy enough, Dave, I think if Hendon Hooker stays healthy, even down 18 points, there's a chance they come back and win that game in the fourth quarter.
I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, but it was baffling. South Carolina was left for dead, guys. We had Shane Beamer fired. Dave and I were on the show. Jonathan Crompton even came on the show. I remember it distinctly on a Friday, and we were like, so, do they fire Shane Beamer at the end of the year, or do they just fire him now? That's how it was.
Okay, I'm going to play ignorant devil's advocate because I want to make sure that the listeners and viewers are 100% up to speed. Okay, it may have helped South Carolina against Tennessee, but how did it help South Carolina against Clemson? How do we know that South Carolina team didn't just get hot and they didn't play well and they figured out how to use Spencer Rattler? So I'm going to be the other guy. I'm going to be the South Carolina fan who says, Caleb, what are you talking about? You're not giving them credit for winning those games. Those were big-time wins.
The same month that Connor Stallions attended a Tennessee home game, he attended his Clemson home game. And the week after Tennessee, South Carolina went and beat Clemson. Look at Shane Beamer's resume, guys. And I'm just going to I could just pull it up. He's been South Carolina head coach for 3 years now. Guys, Tell me a quality team he's beaten outside of those 2 weeks in those random 2 weeks in November. His best win his first year was Auburn. And then he hasn't beaten a ranked team outside of those 2 weeks. And those were 2 college football playoff teams. You don't have Shane Beamer's record. And then in a random November, in the middle of a 3-year run, you beat 2 college football playoff teams, one on the road and one in a blowout. Okay, that does not happen. What we know is that, and people are asking me, well, Caleb, why does it matter? You know, why would Michigan exchange that information for South Carolina? Why would they care if Tennessee or Clemson were in the playoff? Here's what we know. Michigan was trying to maximize its chances to, and I'll tell you what the incentive would be. Michigan did beat Ohio State that year. Ohio State still got into the playoff, remember? 2022?
Yes.
Michigan was trying to maximize its chances of eliminating all college football playoff competition. So in case they lost, those teams wouldn't jump ahead of them.
And why that is so important, what he just talked about there, Michigan in 2022 had the weakest schedule you've ever seen in your life. Had they lost to Ohio State, and it would have been a one-loss Michigan versus a one-loss Tennessee, who had beaten Alabama, who had beaten LSU at LSU, we would have gotten picked. We would have jumped them for sure, guaranteed. We were sitting at number 5. All we had to do is be in the top 4. So that's a very important point that Caleb just brought up there.
And that was what they were doing. And it ended up having no impact because Michigan beat Ohio State. But here's the crazy thing. According to more rumors and reports, and this is not confirmed, but remember when we were baffled on how TCU beat Michigan because we knew Michigan was so much better and Georgia blew out Michigan right after that?
Somewhat. I mean, I wasn't baffled, but I thought Michigan would win easier.
According to some sources, TCU knew about the sign stealing scandal. They found out about it, and they changed all of their signals the week of the game. Every single one of them.
I have no doubt that happened.
And what did that do? That allowed TCU to beat Michigan. And then TCU played Georgia. How did that game play out?
No.
TCU had backdoored their way into that playoff, and because they reversed all of their signals, now Michigan's thinking, oh, they're going to run this play. Suddenly they throw a pass. Then the next play, oh, well, this is going to be this play. It's the exact opposite. And they're beating up on Michigan. You're going, TCU's no good. They backdoored their way barely into that playoff. They had no business being in there. And somehow they beat Michigan, who was a good team that year. Plus, they had everybody's signs. But because they reversed it, the old switcheroo, they beat them. Then they go in and play Georgia. And Georgia literally has a parade in the third quarter for Stetson Bennett. He's on a float in the third quarter doing the Queen's Wave, going around the stadium early in the third quarter because it's like 42-6. And so they just continued to just enjoy the last 2 quarters because the game was over. So that was an excellent point by Caleb as well. When you've got somebody's signs, you've got a huge advantage. If you know somebody's going to pass and you have a clue where it was going, that's monstrous for your defense. If you know what defense somebody's in, if they're set up against the pass or set up against the run, and you run a play that is opposite of that, you're going to score a lot of touchdowns. So while I cannot prove this, a lot of this smoke is just billowing at this point. Will we find out? It's going to be difficult when you've got Connor Stallions refusing to cooperate on any level. And he does have a special program on Netflix, Sign Stealer.
The Sign Stealer guy.
That's coming out on the 27th. Now, I expect him to do a lot of lying and a lot of dishonesty. That's my opinion. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll come out and be somewhat honest. But I highly doubt we'll find out much about South Carolina. They need to get into his personal information, emails, things like that, to be able to find out. And if he would cooperate, it would be huge. But it doesn't sound like he's going to. Because, look, he's already not a very popular guy in Michigan anymore. They put out a poll, and 70% of the Michigan Wolverines fans don't like him anymore, which is just shocking. The guy basically won a national title for you.
How dare you?
Calm down, Michigan. I know that upset you, but look, you went from 69% winning percentage to 92 when he showed up. And your coach, Jim Harbaugh, who ran off to the NFL, brave Sir Harbaugh.
Brave Sir Robin ran away. No! Bravely ran away. I didn't!
had taken a pay cut and was on the hot seat. Then suddenly Connor Stallions rides in and, oh, we can't lose. We beat Ohio State 3 years in a row after losing to them about 15 years in a row. So none of this makes sense. None of it. But anyway, I thought that was very interesting. Look, a lot of people see this for what it is. There's a high likelihood, in my opinion, that they helped out South Carolina, that they reached out like they did Central Michigan, which would have been very similar. Yeah, he wasn't on the sidelines, but you don't think he could have touched base with an analyst or an assistant coach at South Carolina, especially when their coach, Shane Beamer, was on the hot seat. And here's the weird part for South Carolina. This might be the worst thing that ever happened to South Carolina because you'd probably be through with him. This year, he would have gone 6-6 that year, then 5-7. You'd have fired him, and you'd have a new coach now. Instead, you've got the hot dog guy, the guy that comes out at the end of the game and complains about hot dogs or kicks a cooler and breaks his foot. You've got Butch Jones 2.0. You might have been better off had Connor allegedly not reached out to you and just taken your losses and had you, look, you're going to need a new coach. The last time y'all were really good, you had Steve Spurrier. You're going to have to find another Steve Spurrier or luck up and find a Josh Heupel, who I thought was a bad hire. Boy, was I wrong. I couldn't have been more wrong. He's been a great hire. You're going to have to luck up and find a really good coach like that. And unfortunately, you got to go through a lot of frogs before you find your prince. I believe is how that story goes. Anyway, I thought this was very interesting, and especially hearing from actual journalists. Now, granted, they can't prove it, nor can I. It's rumor, it's innuendo, it's alleged. But anyway, I thought they had pretty interesting points to make there. And it's right along what I've been telling you for, gosh, about a year now. And for you South Carolina fans out there that think I'm bitter or I'm holding a grudge or anything like that.
Took that from me. Hooker stole that from me. Killed that from me.
Okay, maybe I am a little bit bitter. Just a touch. Anyway, if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's continue to cover all these big college sports stories. If you've not subscribed, boom, 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 hit that little button. It will not cost you a dime, and it'll help you get my videos. Right over here is the most recent video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. And we'll see you next time with Sports Talk Jay.